What's going on, everybody? Gar Hoover here, and today we're going to be looking at my track Heron, which I made on the PO-33. Heron's a lo-fi track. You know I love making lo-fi on the PO-33, so this is nothing new. You guys wanted to see how I made it, and I have the samples below if you want to grab those. I also have the data transfer file as well, so if you want to try that out, and you can just get all of the patterns and all the samples pre-chopped. It will remove everything that's on your PO-33 before it uploads everything else, so keep that in mind. But it is a great way to further understand how I made the track. And so with that being said, let's get started looking at my track Heron on the PO-33.
Okay, so let's get started with the samples, as always. We got that slide guitar sound. I sampled myself just sliding into a note on my guitar. You can hear it's got a little bit of a filter going on, removing some of that with a high pass. It makes it a little more lo-fi tone. With that, same thing. I just chopped off the slide, so I copy-pasted the sample and put it here. So that I could have one note that's the slide note, and then the other note that's just the pluck, which we'll look at later when I start to use that as a lead line. Just like a kind of xylophone sound using Sculpture on Logic, which is a physical modeling synth. Once again, another sample from that, which this is the same patch that I made that I also use for the chords, so they kind of sound similar. Just got a standard bass pluck that I made in Massive. Kind of a fake steel drum sound that I made in Massive as well. Another kind of plucky sound. And that's the guitar again. And then this is like a flute type of sound. A lot of these came from Sculpture because I really wanted this to have an organic feel that always works well for lo-fi. And wanted it to kind of sound a little bit more like Animal Crossing, so there's a lot more light, plucky, fun sounds like that. Then I have just this nature sample. Pretty simple. That was just me from a video I filmed, and I just ripped the audio from it. As always, I layer my drum kit. So I got standard. And then you can hear there where you're getting the hi-hat and the snare. You can hear some of them are layered because then I can have the hi-hat layered on top of the drums so that I don't have to use numerous tracks to have the drums. The drums can just be on one track, and I can remove the hi-hats as I need them, or shakers. So pretty fun samples. You can get those down below. Then I have the chords. You just got to remember where they're at because the PO-33 sometimes chops them differently. And that's two layered Sculpture sounds. So that is that for the samples. Okay, so up next we're going to just look at the intro. And then it goes into the verse. So there you already saw I had to switch up my pattern. So initial pattern is first pattern, second pattern, to the first pattern, to this pattern 8 right here. But let's look at this pattern first. So this is pretty simple. Let's look at the chords because these stay pretty consistent throughout the entire song. So you have the initial. So instead of them being as how I had them at their initial pitch, I pitched them up because they sound kind of fun, lighthearted, get some cool textures on them. And you can hear I use that instead of going, I use the tail end of the decayed sound. So you can see I place it right there, and it's just, these are just clean quarter notes down the first column. And I'm just going through the chord progression. somewhere there. There it is. So that's how I do it. I do that a lot with a lot of chords just to give it a variation sometimes, is just kind of see what happens when you chop it to just the tail, because then you get some dynamic change as well, and it can be fun for rhythms. So, I mean, that's all I'm doing there. And you can hear I'm doing some drum stuff too. Very, very simple. Just got the kick, and I got a kick here. However, this kick you can hear has the shaker on it. This one does not. So that means I'm just having the shaker go every quarter note, just going tss, 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 on top of the little kind of rim shot. You hear that? So that's all that's going on. And then you can hear I've got the birds in the back. That all I did was just trigger it, had it really long, and then you can hear I've got this little choke here. And that choke was because originally I was going to have this be the final pattern. And it was just going to loop these two. But then I added this one later. I'll explain that. But this is the choke so that the sample doesn't carry on into the next the next pattern, because sometimes if you just have it play out the entire sample, it's going to trickle into the other pattern and it's going to steal notes from the other tracks which are playing as well, and you don't want that. So including that, so you have to trigger it first. So triggers, and it's going to keep playing, and now it's going to get choked. And so now once you get to a different pattern, it immediately stops. And then you can have all the other tracks be utilized, all 4 tracks, because you can only have 4 tracks playing on the PO-33 at the same time for other things. But what I did was, just to switch it up, I added a fake bandpass filter. So what I did was I took what has low end and put a high pass filter on it. So you'll hear that with the drums. The drums I removed, the kick is not as weighty. And then some of the other effects I add, or the other sounds, like the birds and the chords, I put a high pass filter on them so that they kind of met halfway with each other to make a fake band pass, which is classic. You hear that in a lot of lo-fi stuff. You can do that on the OP1 or sometimes on an SP404. You hear that all the time in lo-fi. So I figured that's a great transitional effect, is to go from and then you just go back into the verse. So that's how I did that. It's pretty easy. It's pretty clear cut for the intro, but now let's take a look at the verse. Okay, time for the verse. The verse is pretty easy as well. Okay, so that is how that works. You can hear, let's just start with the drums, because so the chords are the same thing. Chords are completely the same, nothing new there, so that's great. We don't have to deal with that. The drums are pretty simple. I have them going 8th note rhythms, so just this vertical row and this vertical row for the most part. You might get some stuff in this row, the 4th row, that adds a little bit of variation, because I do have the swing turned on as well. That's something to mention. Holding down BPM and twisting this, you can adjust the swing, and that can also play a factor in the rhythms and how they feel. Especially for lo-fi, swing is always good to have some of that. So you can hear I've got now the hi-hat on both, or the shaker on both of these channels, or both of these vertical rows. So both of those, it goes kick, kick, and then you can see I got the shaker filling in any spot without a percussive element. Other than these, you got the 2 snares or rim shots right there. And then you can hear there's that little different hi-hat, just to add a little alternate. And then you can hear as well, I add this little additional quieter snares. So what I did was I turned down the volume. So turned it down, and then I just punched it in. And that was how you do it, because you can get that nice ghost note kind of feel without it being too obvious. It still provides that bounce, which is nice to have. And then the other pattern, I had to throw it down here because I was tight on space. So you can hear I'm doing a lot more with the drums here. So I'm adding that additional ghost note and then another one here at the end, just to add a little bit more energy. It's not flashy necessarily or super drawing the attention, but it does catch your ear and you notice, oh, there's something about to change, or it's about to come back around on itself, something that would happen after 4 measures normally. So that's that. We can look at the bass. The bass is pretty simple for this right now. So all I'm really doing is I'm walking up and down the notes within the chord. So these are primarily 7th chords or just regular minor or major chords. Nothing too crazy, but what I do is I usually just try and, with my bass lines, I don't want them to be too busy, but I want them to be interesting. And so usually that involves, as you can see, the pattern, they're just pretty clean. They aren't trying to be crazy. It's just 8th notes, so there's no 16th note kind of rhythms going on, but when I add one in, it adds that bounce and it's fun. So that's what's going on with that. And then this final one as well. So once again, you can hear I'm outlining a chord right there. So it's very, that's how I always do it is, so if you have any musical knowledge or if you wrote out your own chords, always try and just outline them, whether that's the more than the root note, do the root, the 5th, the octave, 7th, 3rd, whatever you want to do. It usually adds a little bit extra flair. And then we've got the little pluck sound. This melody, I'm not going to break it down note by note, but you can see once again, as I was talking about, these, the 2 and the 4 for the vertical rows, these, the odd or the even numbers, they're always going to be affected the most or only by swing. The odd numbers are not going to be affected by swing. So when you crank your swing, you're going to notice that only on the odd or the even numbers. And that's important to remember. So like if you're wondering why am I not getting any bounce or swing out of something, it's probably because you don't have anything on the even numbers. So keep that in mind while you're making your beats. It's a real easy way to add a little bit extra fun and bounce. So that's that. And then you can hear, once I go from there, I go back into just the regular thing we were listening to earlier, which was part of the intro, but we only heard the second half of it. But now I have the first half included as well. And this aids as kind of like the pre-chorus right before jumping into the chorus. So with that, that is that for the verse, and now we can take a look at the chorus. Okay, let's listen to the chorus. All right, so you can hear I've got some interesting stuff going on here. A big part of this is kind of the call and response. I like doing that a lot with my music, especially if it's lo-fi. I think it adds a little bit of intrigue, especially if you have 2 different sounds that are different elements. They can sound fun kind of doing that call and response, as you hear with like the steel drum and then that kind of plucky part, which we've already heard This is kind of like a variant of it. It's not as intensely, there's not as much high end on it as the other sample. But as you know, if you think about it, if you have these notes playing from this as well as the plucks, plus the chords, plus the bass, plus the drums, we're looking at 5 sounds, and you can only have 4 sounds playing at once. So the key is learning how to share, and that means you have to be able to trim samples properly, or at least trim the end note. So that's something you can do with the melodic banks, is you can hold them down and you can adjust the length, which is really nice to have. So what you want to do is look. I had to find which one. Where's my next sound start? So in this case, for the call and response, it starts on 10. So I can have a note carry out until 9 and it won't interrupt it, which is great. So if I go here over to the steel drum sample again, and I can go here and I can adjust the length, and you can see it's showing what's illuminated, and I have it to 9 here. So it should be good, because if I had it where it was carrying out, it can cause some stealing to take place. Thankfully, the sound is not carrying out long enough for you to hear it, but if it was a longer note that had longer, like the guitar note or something like that carries out longer, you would be able to hear it being cut off. And sometimes, especially if you're new to the PO-33, you encounter this a lot and you can get frustrated by it. And the key is to make sure that you are having all of your samples play well with one another. So adjusting the end lengths on the melodic ones is crucial. And especially creating those chokes like I did with the bird sample, where we have it choke out. That's also a great tip for learning how to share all 4 tracks well. So you could hear there, when I added that extra note, you could hear it was choking it, right? But now it sounds good. And once again, these are just very simple, especially for like Animal Crossing or some upbeat lo-fi stuff like this. You don't want it to sound necessarily childish, but they are simpler melodies. They are not necessarily something super jazzy or complicated, but they are very positive and major. So you want to make sure to do stuff that outlines the chords, that is just basic kind of jumps where it's probably to the 5th, or maybe, especially on these, let me see. I'm just doing very simple stuff. So that's just a whole note up and then up to the 5th. So it's very easy. It's not complicated, but they pair nicely to create this fun feel. But the drums are probably the thing that's the most interesting in this section, because we add a lot of energy with them. So we got our kicks. The kicks are in the same spot. Nothing new there. Snares are the same. Nothing new there. Shaker. We have filled in every single spot where there can be a shaker with a shaker. If it's not filled with anything else, I've stuffed it with a shaker. And that just adds that additional energy, right? And you can hear that additional little click sound. Let me see. Yeah, you can hear it right here. Those 2 click sounds, I just threw them in at the end. And that's just always nice to have at the end of a pattern, just to add a little bit of like a little drum fill type of thing, especially if you're looping back around. And here, for the final pattern, I have the drums cut out except for the little rim shot, and then it's quiet, because now it loops around one time, but then it also aids in transferring over to the bridge, which we'll look at later. But this really does help dynamically sometimes to just have stuff cut out rather than adding more to it, especially for lo-fi. And the bass line is actually a little bit busier here. We can see that we've got additional notes that are filling in on the even columns here that are adding extra bounce, right? So that's always crucial. If you want to have a bouncy, good bass line, you've got to throw it on those even notes with some swing like that and have it just grooving, and it sounds so good, and it works really well for lo-fi once again. And you can hear my sample is nothing special. I just put a low pass filter on a saw and then had a additional sub sine wave on it. Nothing fancy, very simple, but it's just enough to keep the bass line in the groove going. But with that, we are good to look at the bridge, which has the cool guitar part. All right, so we are good to take a look at the bridge, which we will do right now. We'll just punch it in like that. Yep, we have a few things that are different here, so that's where it's nice to kind of have this like bridge outro type of thing. I'm not sure what you want to call it, but it's nice. First thing that we notice is there's a difference in our chords. So it's the same chord progression, but we, instead of having just that rhythm where we're just going down in quarter notes, I now have it on the offbeat, which means that it's going to be on the third vertical row right here. And I have it on the notes, instead of it being the pluck where it kind of is, not all the notes are being hit at the same time on my plucks. They're really more of a strum. So this makes it a much cleaner hit. And so that works for these little offbeat hits. And that's how you get that nice kind of, it's almost like a Jamaican type of reggae groove is really what that is, those nice offbeat hits like that. It usually would be done on a guitar, but it works well for this. The bass line is the exact same as the chorus. It just sounds a lot different with the groove. So it still has a fun feel. You actually kind of hear the bass line better with this current riff going on. Drums are a little bit different. The big thing is that I don't have anything in the second vertical row because, except here, I think this is it's a little snare hit type of vibe. Because that, like, not hitting every note and doing the fourth vertical row as well and having the shaker on these, it just kind of adds and further accentuates that offbeat groove. And so that works really well. And then there's just that classic kind of two little wood clacks. I don't know what you call them. But that is that. And then you got the guitar. And so this is where we get those interesting slide thing. And once again, this is about sharing. So just as I did with the other lead line, as I mentioned in the sample part as well, but I'll explain it here is just in case you just skipped over that. I have the one sample where it's sliding, and then I have the other one where I have it where it's already slid up to the note, and I just trimmed it. So now I have both options of just a regular guitar where it's sliding up and the other one where it's just plucked. So I can create kind of like a lead line with some bends or slides in it, as you hear there. So So when I think about it, I didn't want to be too obnoxious with slides. So I only have a slide here on the first note, and then a slide here on the second time, and then a slide here and a slide here. But it's the rest of the time, the lead line is just on the other just picked guitar part. So you can see the first one where I have it is on the 5th step, so I can have that initial slide guitar ringing out until the 4th step. So I just trim it so it's to the 4, and then I can let go, and it will be good. And that's how the guitar part goes. And then the outro of the bridge, I guess, is very simple. It's the same thing, except I just don't have the guitar part doing the crazy extra stuff. It's just doing the little slide notes. And it kind of makes a fake kind of Hawaiian guitar almost, I guess you could say. And I kind of like that it sounds fake. It makes it a little bit more interesting. And it sounds almost more video game-esque in a way. So I believe that is that. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this. If you have any questions, please leave them down for me in the comments. And as always, please download the samples, or you can download that file transfer. Remember, if you do the file transfer, it will wipe your PO-33, so keep that in mind if you do it. But you'll be able to take all the samples, flip it, make it your own. Be sure to tag me if you do. I love watching what people do with my samples. And with that, I hope you guys have a great week, and I'll see you in the next one. See ya.